So now that we've covered how to do an Excel function that automatically will pull in the row numbers so that you can kind of do math equations on individual lines of tickets, which can be useful for calculating out, dollars per mile, barrels per mile, dollars per barrel, things like that. A bunch of those, multiplication, division, or you could do a sum of different properties in there. We're going to cover some of the other custom cell content that you may have in there. So I'm going to go ahead and click plus, create a new column in here. We'll go over here and we are going to go in and create some more custom cell content. So in this case, let's run through some of the other ones here. So the simplest one is definitely hard code. So we're going to just call this hard code number. So a hard code is just the ability to put in just some content in there. So sometimes your customers may want you to include a column where it just gives you like a transporter ID number or some other facility ID number that you're always dropping off at or something. If it's something that never, ever, 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 ever changes, then you could go ahead and put that in here. So I'm going to call this test hard code. And I'm going to, it's a string, so I'm going to put it that. String is just like, letters. So let's go ahead and put that in there. So that's pretty straightforward. We'll call this transporter ID number. So let's go ahead and create a new column right here. I'm going to go ahead and save some of these changes, and we're going to do some more custom cell content. So the next one we can talk about, let's do mapped fields because custom logic is probably the most complicated. But a mapped field lets you pull in information that is not necessarily tied to a specific individual ticket. Usually this is useful for invoicing. As you can see in here, this organization that I've set up has a bunch of invoice settings in here, some settlement ones, but we don't have those set up properly in the system. But if you wanted to include the invoice name or the invoice month or something like that, or any of this purchaser information that's not necessarily tied to a ticket, but is information that you may want to pull on here, you could go ahead and do that. Typically, that's something you might not have in this repeated data section. Instead, what you may do is have it up here in an extra header or down in a footer section. So we'll cover that really quick. If I wanted to create extra content above my repeated kind of looped tickets right here, I can go ahead and click on that and add new rows, new columns. So if I wanted to say, this is invoice, and I wanted to say, let's invoice name and invoice date. Even though I know we're not making an invoice, we can go ahead and include this. We could do invoice name, and then we'll custom content here. We're going to, not hard code, we're going to map the invoice name and put it there. And you'll notice I didn't give it a name, so it's just called generic custom content. I could go ahead and say this is, invoice name, so that somebody doesn't have to open this up to kind of search what's going on. And then if I wanted to put in the mapped field of invoice date, I could go ahead and do that as well. So we'll just do invoice created date and apply that. Also didn't name it there. But so those mapped fields are usually invoice specific information or information about your customer that you may need to have at the top of your report before you even get into your data set here. And that's what's good about the extra header up here. You can do that. And you can see that we have the ability to add columns, just like we do down there, delete that. But it also has, because this is kind of just each column is, an item, and then each row is one of your tickets. You just kind of don't have a lot of rows in here. But if you wanted to create rows in the middle right here or move rows up and down, you could go ahead and do that, delete them as well. So you've got those similar movement abilities up here. And then you also have, in addition to custom cell content, you also can customize the styles up here using the exact same style editor. And the same thing goes for the bottom. So sometimes you want to have a footer. Maybe you want to have sums down here at the bottom. You could go ahead and do that as well. So you could add a bunch of columns, put a sum down here. But yeah, so that's the mapping and the hard coding. In the next section, we'll cover the last bit of custom content, which is the custom logic editor.